Richard and I always help tell the story through the songs. Walt liked that.
I think one of the reasons why we got along so well with the boss was the fact that he knew that we didn't care about anything but the story. If we could make the story develop and push forward, he was very happy. Everyone respected him tremendously. He was so intuitive and correct usually. But more than that, he respected what we felt too. Nobody at the studio was aware that Walt was as sick as he was.
He'd had a neck pain, and he went in to have that examined because he suspected it might be a pinched nerve.
We knew that he was going into the hospital, and we thought it was about an old polo injury he'd had in his neck. And so we asked him if he was worried about it, and he says, "You're darn right I am."
When diagnostic tests were done, they discovered that he had lung cancer.
Walt was like a father figure to everybody. You just don't think father's ever going to get sick or ever certainly going to die.
In between that period of November and December 15th, he kind of summoned his strength and came back to pay that one last visit to the studio.
Everybody was kind of perked up. Gee, Walt's feeling better, you know, that's good.
I was so grateful and glad to see him. I said, "Gee, it's good to see you, Walt." He said, "Ken, it's sure good to be here."
He was very thin and gaunt and grayed. I realized he's much sicker than I imagined.
He came into my office and sat down. He just wanted to talk. Matter of fact, in that chair in there, as a matter of fact. And then he walked down the hall and said goodbye. He never said goodbye to anybody in his life. Well, I'll see you next week or something.
And then he asked to be driven home because he no longer had the energy.
And that was the last anybody ever saw. Then it wasn't more than another week that we came to work, and about 9:30, I remember it so clearly, Ollie came in with tears in his eyes and he says, "Walt's dead."
People dealt with it in their own way. Some were in tears, some just packed up their stuff and went home. Others just sat at their desks silently.
All the animators were coming in. Milt and Frank, they were devastated. What are we going to do?
I believe that Walt never ever gave it a thought that what if would happen to this wonderful thing if I passed on. I don't think he ever thought of that.
In some ways, Walt's death forced each one of them to become the mature animators that they were by that point. The mantle of animation was really placed on their shoulders.
There was an afternoon late in the course of Walt's illness when his end was imminent that he called my dad over to the hospital and explained to him that he wanted my dad to take over as the person who would take the full-length feature animated programs forward at the studio.
Willie forged ahead and got the picture going, and everybody was behind him 100%.
This was survival as far as I was concerned, and most of the animators were concerned. It was survival to keep this thing going, this thing called Walt Disney Animation.
That was a good feeling, knowing that his last film would be completed the way Walt wanted it completed.
In February, we ran the picture, and a large group of the studio people were in to see the film. And Hazel George, the nurse, talked to me afterwards.
Walt's nurse was very close to Walt because Walt had an injury and he needed massages regularly after a long day and all that, so she usually knew what was going on in Walt's mind.
She had this way of talking about Walt. She said, "Walt wasn't a man, he was a force of nature." In that last scene where Baloo and Bagheera dance off into the sunset, she says, "You know, that's just the way Walt went off. He went off into the sunset." Just like that, and there he's gone.
I think that's a way of saying, and life goes on, and I think that's a very nice way of capping Walt's career as well.
It's like a coda to his career. It conveys the qualities that he is best remembered for, the personalities of the characters, the warmth of them, the believability of the fantasy.
And then that magical thing, a year later, in 1967, almost a year after his death, The Jungle Book was released. A new Disney film.
And it was kind of like Walt Disney's time-released posthumous Christmas gift to the kids of the world.
It was a big darn deal, and it was very popular.
Jungle Book was the first picture to make a lot of money. Everybody was so proud. This picture gave the company confidence in animation, which may have or may not been wavering at the time.
Both Louis Prima and Phil Harris, with all the things that they've done in their careers, they both were quoted as saying, the one thing that gives me immortality will be the Walt Disney picture, Jungle Book.
Unfortunately, there wasn't a way for Bill Peet and Walt to mend their ways before Walt passed away. But when Bill Peet wrote his autobiography, some 20 years later, he had a lot of great and kind things to say about Walt.
The key to any Disney animated film has to be the heart. In that period of time, in the making of Jungle Book, Walt was driving it home to those guys. This is why we're doing what we do.
Jungle Book is a distillation of a long, rich friendship between Frank and Ollie, of a loving relationship between Wooly and his son Bruce. It's a distillation of the relationships of people in that studio, the lives they'd lived, the emotions they'd felt, and they found a vehicle that they could really express all these things through.
To me, it's very poetic that here at the end of his life, the last picture he worked on, it sort of came full circle of the fun that he had way back in the 30s working on the shorts with the guys he had there. It may even have been the last story meeting that he had with the animators. He said to them, "Gee guys, I had forgotten how much fun this is."
Look for the bare necessities, the simple bare necessities. Forget about your worries and your strife. I mean the bare necessities, or Mother Nature's recipes that bring the bare necessities of life.
Yeah, man!